In case you missed it, here's a Sports Animal Rewind. Our Eye on the SEC is brought to you by Miller Eye Care and Optical, 694-2622.
We go to Starkville, Mississippi. The Mississippi State Bulldogs will start practice tomorrow, and we bring in from BulldogBlitz.com covering Mississippi State, Paul Jones joins us here on the new Sentinel Sports page. Hey, Paul, Vince Ferrara, and Mike Strange. How you doing this morning, Paul?
Doing great. Just a normal day of Bulldogs 24/7. We've got a press conference with Dan Mullen here at 11 and wrap up basketball. Kind of wrapping up the season with Rick Ray later on today, and baseball as usual. So just a normal sports field day here. Yeah,
no doubt about it. Now, in terms of spring practice, what are some of the storylines, some of the top things that you've got your eye on that you're curious to see and maybe try to get answers to in spring practice?
Well, I think a lot of eyes will obviously be on the quarterback position, and not so much because of the battle, but the fact that Mississippi State has one healthy scholarship quarterback this spring, Tyler Russell. Dak Prescott recently had turf toe surgery. He will be out until this summer, so that leaves him with only Tyler Russell. And another thing I think people are anxious to see is the influx of new faces on the coaching staff. Mississippi State brought in David Turner from Kentucky, who's been in Mississippi State before, the defensive line coach. Of course, Jeff Collins was promoted to defensive coordinator. And then Billy Gonzalez is new at receivers coach. He's a familiar name in the SEC with stops at Florida and LSU. And new cornerbacks coach, former Super Bowl champion Deshae Townsend, will take over from Elvin Smith, who left for Auburn. So a lot of new faces on that staff, probably the most turnover that Dan Mullen's had in his tenure in Mississippi State. So I think that will be anxious to watch, and especially in the secondary where Mississippi State will be trying to replace Jonathan Banks and Darius Slay, both of whom should be top draft choices here in the next month.
Paul, get back to the quarterback. You mentioned Tyler Russell, only healthy quarterback. Why is that? And who else when camp breaks in August? Who else will be in the mix there? Although I realize he's your starter.
Well, obviously, like I said, Dak Prescott will be back in the mix this fall. They felt like his surgery went well, and it was just a lingering turf toe injury that they discovered needed surgery to prepare a ligament in his toe, and they felt like that went well. And then in the fall, you will also have Damian Williams, 2013 signee from New Orleans, a dual-threat quarterback, similar to Dak Prescott, not as tall as Prescott, but about the same build in weight-wise. And then we will know this summer whether or not that quarterback numbers will add one with Cord Sandberg, a very talented dual-threat quarterback from Manatee, Florida High School. But, of course, is expected to get drafted in the Major League Baseball draft in June. Where he falls will determine if he begins his college football career this fall or begins his minor league baseball career.
Visiting with Paul Jones from BulldogBlitz.com, the Mississippi State side on the 24/7 Sports Network. Here on the new Sentinel Sports page as we continue our eye on the SEC, previewing every team in spring practice. What about early enrolls, guys that you might be curious to see and that may have a shot to get that early start to compete for playing time?
Well, two guys that stand out are Justin Cox, JUCO All-American, and actually a former Mississippi State signee. He will either line up at cornerback or safety, depending on where he's needed the most. For now, most signs, point towards him being at cornerback. Justin will definitely is expected to be a starter there. And then Mississippi State lost 5 senior receivers, so adding Jeremy Chappelle, 6'4", 220-pound receiver on the outside. He's from Texas, Tyler, Texas. And he's expected also to compete for a starting job. Mississippi State also added a couple of prep school kids that were former signees, Kevon Coleman, a safety, and Artemis Samuel, a tight end. Obviously, those guys are a little bit behind the junior college guys since they are younger, but I think most expect Cox and Chappelle to come out of the spring, having nailed down a starting position.
Paul, what's the strength of this football team right now as you stand going into spring practice, in your opinion?
Well, I think when you look at as a whole on offense, it would be the depth at running back, and that's with Nick Griffin, who will be out this spring. He tore his ACL, but Darius Perkins had a very solid year last year. He'll be a senior in 2013. Then redshirt freshmen last year, Josh Robinson and Derek Milton, both got their feet wet in SEC and had mixed results. And Josh Robinson had a very good Gator Bowl outing against Northwestern. The offensive line returns every starter. So, I mean, that's a positive. They didn't have the best of years last year, but I think, as the old saying goes, a year older up front should make them better alone. And leading that group is Gabe Jackson, who decided to come back for his senior year instead of going early in the NFL draft. So I think how that offensive line goes will determine, I guess you could say that about every SEC team, that will determine their success in 2013.
You mentioned a number of the changes and the most turnover under Dan Mullen there in Starkville. Are there going to be schematic changes or tweaks with any of those new coaches?
Well, I think you'll see a more aggressive defense. Jeff Collins has always been that way when he's controlled the defense, and he was that way in Central Florida. In his time at Georgia Tech and Mississippi State, his linebackers crew is probably, he also coaches linebackers, and that's probably their strong suit on defense as well. So, and then I think you'll see a more aggressive approach with the cornerbacks, with Deshae Townsend. He played at Alabama, and in the NFL, he was always in your face, man-to-man, and that's the way he wants to coach as well. So I think that'll be two critical areas of need, because Mississippi State's defense last year was more of a read and react, and their pressure on the quarterback was very much lacking last year.
Paul Jones covers Mississippi State on the 24/7 Sports Network. We're going around the Southeastern Conference and getting you spring practice previews. You can follow him on Twitter. It's PJ247 Sports for more on Mississippi State football during spring practice on the 24/7 Sports Network. Hey, Paul, great to talk to you. Really appreciate your insights on Mississippi State. We'll catch up with you again soon.
Anytime, guys. You have a great week.
All right, you do the same. That is Paul Jones joining us, previewing Mississippi State in spring practice.